It has become a Thanksgiving tradition in some homes across America. After the turkey and after the shopping, some families decide to go to the movies or watch a movie at home. That was the case for our family last year. The DVD of Lord of the Rings trilogy finally came out, and we couldn't wait to watch it. And so we watched it as a family. I should say we started to watch it as a family, but I don't think we were even a quarter way through it when my daughter and my wife said, "This is just too violent for me." They couldn't stomach all the violence. I guess they had too much turkey, right? No. They said they couldn't stomach all the violence, and they got up. And that just left my son and I, and we watched the first DVD of the Fellowship of the Rings, and then later on we watched the second DVD, which is the Two Towers, and then we watched the third, which was the Return of the King. As I started thinking about it later, I must admit, why all the violence? I remember reading the book as a youth and not thinking it was so violent. But seeing it on a big screen is different from reading it on a page in the book. But if you know the historical context of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, you can understand all its violence. For it was written by J.R.R. Tolkien during World War II and was completed at the end of the war. And he wrote it to help his son and help others like his son to understand the horror and the tragedy that they had experienced as a people. How the madness of one person to want to create a master race, to dominate all the other races, what that leads to. And so he created a world called Middle Earth, and he created Lord Sauron to create a ring that would control all the other rings. And you see this quest for dominance. It is a morality play of good versus evil. And I'm reminded of another book and another character to help us understand the world in which we live. And that is the world of Harry Potter. Do you remember what Lord Voldemort said to Harry about power? He said to Harry, "There's no such thing as right or wrong. There's just power. Those who are willing to use it and those too afraid." Lord Voldemort was wrong, and Harry was right. J.R. Tolkien was right. The people of faith are waiting for God to do only what God can do. This is what the first Sunday of Advent is about. We are waiting for God to return, to establish a kingdom of peace and justice. And so Habakkuk had a good complaint. The children of Israel were in exile, and they were suffering at the hands of their captors and tormentors. And Habakkuk says, "How long shall the righteous suffer at the hands of evildoers?" And so he waits for a word from God. As we wait on God to do only what God can do. Kenny Green is an amazing musician. He's a jazz musician. He plays the saxophone, and he plays it very well. They interviewed him on All Things Considered several nights ago. Maybe you had a chance to hear that interview. There was a time when Jimmy Green could not write and could not play music. You see, his daughter, Anna, was one of the victims of the Newtown tragedy. The violence, the senseless violence that suddenly can turn our world very dark, as though the sun does not shine and the moon does not give off its light. Such was his world and the world of World War II, Tolkien's war. So Jimmy Green couldn't write, but they got to a time where he had to put to pen and paper to make sense of the horror that he and his family had experienced. The same pen and paper that Tolkien will write a novel to help us make sense. The first tract entitled It's a Beautiful Life, that first tract is called Come Thou Almighty King. And the reason why it's called that is the last piece that he has of his daughter singing. She loves to sing. And his older son, was learning to play the piano. And you can tell this is a church-going family because they got out the hymnal and were playing Come Thou Almighty King. And Anna starts singing that wonderful tune. Anna knows something that the people of faith know. That in the midst of darkness, when we think that things cannot get any worse, that we wait for the return of the King. God tells Habakkuk, if the vision tarries, the vision of the peaceable kingdom, if the vision tarries, wait for it. Like a watchman who walks the rampart at night, looking for any sign of evil to warn the people of faith, and is waiting to embrace the dawn of a new day. We know that dawn of the new day as the return of the King. But as a metaphor for people of faith this day, I wonder, as we're walking the ramparts looking for any signs of evil, what should the people of faith be warned about? What I would suggest to you would be our world is awash in violence. We're desensitized to it. We see it on the big screen. We see it on our TV screens, on the nightly news. We read about it in the paper, and we think nothing of it until it hits home, like it hit home for Danny Green. There's something profoundly wrong with our world when parents send their children off to school not knowing whether they're going to come back safe to them. Something profoundly wrong when people of faith cannot worship without a gunman coming in and shooting them as they did in Israel in the synagogue. We live in a world where, with the people of faith, many years ago, and even now, we wait for God to do what only God can do. Come again to establish a kingdom of peace and justice. We've forgotten the words of Jesus, who said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for the kingdom of God is theirs." We've forgotten that when the King returns, nations will beat their swords into plowshares, and they'll not learn war anymore. They'll learn the ways of peace. We need to teach our people the ways of peace, the ways of forgiveness. What else should we be warned of as we're watchmen walking the ramparts at night? And I would have to say it would be the way Christ has been crowded out of Christmas. I know I'm going to sound like the Grinch, but as I get older, I do believe that Christ is being crowded out of Christmas. I can understand secular society not having room for Christ, but what I can't understand is for the people of faith not to make room for Christ. And somehow we thought, and we reduce life to what you can buy and consume and wrap and put under a tree, and we know that's not what gives life meaning and dignity. And yet so many families will spend beyond their means and then on January wonder how they're going to pay for it. There must be another way. Isn't it interesting that the first Christians were known as the people of the way? Another way? Maybe it's time we adopt another way in which we celebrate Christmas. Amy is teaching a wonderful class. Mike Slaughter has written a wonderful book called It's Not Your Birthday. And I encourage you, whether you attend the class or not, to buy the book. And I encourage you to check out the DVD in the library if you cannot make it on Sundays to attend her class. But Mike has some practical ways in which we can celebrate Christ. Instead of preparing for the presents that will be under the tree, we prepare to receive his presence in our lives. I think Anna knows something that we've forgotten, that our world will not be made right until God makes it right. That's why we sing, "Come, thou Almighty King."